I was recently visited by a student of singing for a week of intensive work. At the end of the week, we had a meeting, and he said something that really surprised me. He was giving me a kind of review of how I had performed during the week, which I really appreciated. And what he said was that I was strangely organized. I still kind of don't know what to say about that, but I hope Mr. Hackbarth is watching. Mr. Hackbarth was my 5th grade elementary school teacher. And one note that I think I got on every report card was I needed organizational skills. I really needed to work on my organization. Next year, my teacher said the same thing. And also the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, and in just about every class I took, until university, when basically they stopped trying. They stopped trying to tell you things like you need organizational skills. By that point, it's your problem, and if you were going to do anything about it, you probably already would have. So I was really surprised, because I don't think of myself as an organized person. I think of myself as a very disorganized person. And I use a bunch of things to help me deal with that. And then I realized that actually that's what he was talking about, and that an organized person is someone who uses a system in order to keep things organized. What he was talking about was new school singing. Now, I know I've talked about specific techniques here that I've suggested, but new school singing is not really a specific set of techniques, or at least not singing techniques. As far as new school singing is concerned, you can grab techniques from anyone, anywhere. It's just a technique. There's nothing special about it because of where it came from. If it's a good technique, it observes principles that are universal. I suppose that you could say new school singing is a meta technique, a sort of technique of techniques. And the biggest thing it does is organize your efforts around your own development as a singer. New school singing has 3 categories of action. Those are position, motion, and attitude. Sure, you could think of position as something you are instead of something you're doing, but for the purposes of singing, of getting something done, we will think of these as action. Position and motion are everything you could think of that you can draw or photograph. Maybe you can't videotape it. Maybe you can. Maybe you can get imaging of it. But in any case, it's theoretically possible to put that on paper, to put that on a screen, to look at it directly. That's position and motion. Position is where something is. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then motion is what happens if you put something one place, move it to a different place. Motion describes everything that's in between. What about this third category, attitude? Attitude is everything you can't draw or photograph. You can't really draw or photograph exactly the feeling of doing something. And if you really think about it, you can't communicate that either, at least not to another person. You have a kind of secret language that only you speak with yourself. Sometimes people get really, really, really good at a particular thing, but they don't have any kind of language to tell you about how they do it. That's attitude. Suppose for a second that I say, I'm walking. Now, I could describe that walking in terms of how I move my feet, how I move my arms, how I move my torso. And yeah, We do describe those things when we're trying to improve how we walk. But none of those are really walking. Walking's an attitude. So when I say position, motion, and attitude, I'm not talking about a new concept for you or a new concept for me. I'm talking about observing how we already understand the world, how we already experience our own bodies and our own environments. Now you may be asking, why do I need to organize these things? So I'll give you an example. Let's say that I go to a particular singer because I really like what they do, but I can't do it. Or sometimes, I've come close to doing what they're doing, but something's not quite right. And so I ask them, how do you do that? And they tell me some kind of translation of the attitude that they use. So they don't tell me about how they move and exactly what it is that they do, but they do give me some sense about how they're interacting with that, how that feels to them. Now, if I observe them, I can see some of the things that they're not mentioning. In my mind, I can compartmentalize what's going on. I can say, okay, this person is giving me accurate information, but it's information about their attitude or a series of attitudes. And they're giving me very little position and motion. However, I can watch them. And maybe if they're really nice, I can even ask if I can touch them. When I do that, the information I'm getting shouldn't go in the same box as the stuff that they're telling me. The stuff that they're telling me is attitude. And it will never work for me because it's in the wrong language. And if I tried to translate that directly into an attitude for myself, there's very, very, very little chance that I'm going to be successful. Now, if I'm spending a lot of time around this specific position and motion that this person is doing, maybe by osmosis, I'll just pick some up through my ass. But what if I actually discipline myself mentally to observe what they're doing, and as much as possible, when a position is always present along with a certain sound, I associate the two together. And if a particular position never makes a particular sound, then I should remember that as a rule, that I cannot have this particular thing in this particular position and get this particular sound. Now the same goes with motion. If I notice that I'm getting from this position to that position just like this person that I admire, but the path that I'm taking is not the same, it implies there's a third position in between the two that's maybe out of bounds. Now I can use all of this to train myself, but what do I have to do in the end? I have to do exactly what this person did, who's trying to show me how to do it. I have to convert all of this information about position and motion, which I can think about, and I can sort of slowly pay attention to, and maybe get the position and motion working for a time. But that's only an opportunity. Then I really need to follow the example of this person that I asked, how do you do this? What they've done is they've turned it all into imagery, feelings, attitude. Having these three categories is not just about making things look nice and neat in your head. One of the fundamental concepts of New School singing, the core practices, if you will, is called switching. Switching is something that I came up with as a way to counter a problem I call loops. Loops are when you find yourself inexplicably doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. But the whole reason that you're doing these things over and over again is to get a different result. That's not logical action. It's absurd, but we do it anyway. And I believe that the reason we do it is because of a lack of organization. And it's difficult to stay organized because there's no instrument here. There's nothing outside of you. Not naturally, anyway. There's nothing outside of you around which you can organize yourself. Switching is a way to get over that. Switching is about making a plan. When I get stuck in a loop, I will change to one of these other modes of action. I will focus on another mode of action. If I've been spending 1 hour trying to get a particular position with my tongue and it's not happening, and I do that for another hour, probably all that's going to happen is it will continue not to happen and I will continue to be frustrated. Maybe at that point, I could benefit from changing to motion, for instance. Maybe instead of conceiving of a static position for my tongue, I could imagine a trajectory and try to alter the trajectory of my tongue. And maybe that doesn't work, but it's something to try. It's a good guess, if you will. If it doesn't work, you can switch again. You could look at, say, the position of something else. You could say, okay, is my neck in the correct position? And then you may find it is not in the correct position. The point isn't that I guessed what was wrong, as is often done as a sort of theater in voice lessons to establish the authority of the teacher. They give themselves easy predictions to make. They make the prediction, and then they make it seem as if they have amazing gifts of perception and a system. They don't, because it's not possible. All you can do is give yourself maybe better odds at coming up with a good guess, a correct guess. And switching helps you do that. And by having your categories of action divided into position, motion, and attitude, you have a way to even write down what it is that you're doing. Maybe you're not so disorganized you need to write things down. Maybe you are. What's important is that somehow you're keeping track of what it is that you're doing. What are you thinking about? Now, next time, I'm going to cover the 3 categories of development. So we have these categories of action, but we could also switch to something else, like looking after your general development. And if we're looking after general development, we see the same division into 3 parts again. So I hope you find this helpful. If you did, you can check out my blog at newschoolsinger.com. And you can read more about New School Singing there. You can ask me questions here if you want, or you can get in touch via Skype.